I would like to talk a bit more about some of the images and symbolism that I'm noticing in this poem. And I've read this poem a few times before, but it's been a very long time. And you will discover that when you spend some time with your poem and then you go away from it for a little while and you come back to it, you'll see things that you didn't see before, which is a good thing, right? So I'm noticing more and more as I read this, like more symbolism. So I want to talk about some of that symbolism. And if you see symbolism in your poem, try to think of questions you could ask your reader to help bring up associations with those symbols. So I mentioned before the idea of the water and purification, and the idea of the Black Baptists and the Tree of Life. And then we get to this sort of parallel between the speaker standing on the bank of the creek, watching all of this happen. He's watching Salome bathe, and he's watching, or swim, and he's watching the kids being baptized, right? And he's kind of like, standing on the bank, not really involved with that, but more like observing. And we get the impression, too, that he's rather naive. The water is sort of serving, in some ways, maybe slightly different functions when it comes to Salome versus when it comes to the children from the church, the boys and girls being baptized. Who knows? Maybe Salome likes to swim in the creek because it makes her feel better, gives her a sense of, feeling refreshed or, just renewed. That's possible as well, but it's not happening within a religious context for her. So we have that line with the water snake, like I mentioned before. And I do know that as I mentioned before, snakes, we associate snakes with like maybe the Garden of Eden, and depending on how we look at it, we might see this a bit differently. So, Christians might look, the purely Christian perspective might look at it like, okay, the snake was a deceiver. We should all be alarmed when we see the snake. It's possible to see it in a different way. The snake is also viewed among some as the bringer of wisdom. So we have this snake moving along the oak, which when I was thinking about this more, I couldn't help but think about like the snake in the Garden of Eden, and maybe in those images we see of old paintings, like from the Renaissance, with the snake wrapped around like the tree of, was it the knowledge of good and evil? So anyway, I think about that snake in the oak and the way it's crawling along the oak, and the fact that the oak is half in water, half in earth. So it's like it's split in a way. So we get this, again, we still get this sense of division, although it's not like cultural or racial at this point. It's more like between knowledge of like spirit and more carnal, knowledge of earthly things. So I think that's a very important image there, and very interesting. And it might tell us something about the speaker's state of mind too, because he's standing there on the bank of the creek and he sees this snake. He's observing it. He notices it. The poet would not include it in the poem if he didn't want us to somehow look at it as telling, as suggestive of something. So if I were in class with you, I would definitely try to elicit comments about the snake and your associations with the snake, and the fact that it seems to be, the fact that it seems to be happening, those images seem to be happening at a moment where he is not paying attention to the cork in the creek anymore. He's totally looking at what's going on with the girl, and he notices all this stuff happening 100 yards, and he notices his cork has disappeared beneath the surface, but he's not going to do anything about it. So we have this image of the snake, and then the water, the oak half in water, half in earth. And then the speaker goes on to say, I knew Salome's brother Cleanth. So in those two lines, we get the idea, yeah, he knows her brother. The speaker knows who he is. But if you continue on with those lines, I knew Salome's brother Cleanth hung our cat with a bootlace from a crooked fence post. So by association, he goes from thinking about Salome to her brother, because I suppose it could have happened recently. He knows this information about her brother, that he did something quite awful, right? He tortured and killed their cat. Based on the next two lines, he seemed to really enjoy it. He knew he pulled on the cat's hind legs, a smile on his face. So this paints the picture of someone who is cruel, who enjoys that cruelty. He's sadistic. Now, that again might come up later in the poem. We can talk about the later lines and how Cleanth's attitude could be displayed there. But I'm going to stop there, and I'll see you in the next video.